Hello, listeners. Hi, my name is Madhavi, and I'm so happy to have you on UppTalk. You have come to the right place if you want to learn about IT and do really cool things with your hands. We are not just another IT company when I say UppTalk. Think of us as your learning partner dedicated to helping you reach your full potential. We have top notch hands on courses to help you build your business, whether you're new to technology or want to move up in your current job. Let's look around this as our first step towards learning.
Just to have an introduction of this, what do you mean by compensation? What could possibly be that? When you say CTC, what is the period, monthly or annual? When I say compensation, it is going to be your entire CTC, which is going to be your gross taxes. And taxes and rates are going to be based on the statutory requirement of every organization and location that you will be working out of. Number two, it is going to contain your earnings, your benefits, plus, most importantly, your compensation is going to say for which period or frequency is this going to be for. Usually, when you get it as a CTC in your offer letter, it is going to say you're going to be paid, say, $80 a year, which is going to be your peak speed. Or if you're going to be in India, it is going to say you're going to get X lakhs of rupees a year. That's how it is going to be. That period is also part of your compensation. Why I'm highlighting is that is what decides everything. This is typically what we are going to be looking at over the next couple of days. We're going to look at compensation, the structure elements, packages, grades, plans, eligibility rules, and everything else as well. And certain rules at a high level is what we are going to be looking at. Like I said, compensation is something which you are going to look at, and it's going to track the compensation at what price level, which is at an organization level and also at an individual worker level. That is number one. And again, like we just saw yesterday, we saw grades and also compensation plans. And grades are nothing but like what we saw for a grade, which is called as an IT recruiter. What is going to be the P range? It could possibly be like 60 to 80K a year for a person who's probably working out of Chicago. Whereas if a person is going to be working out of, say, a Bay Area or a California, it could be upwards of something like 100 to 100K a year. For example, if a person is at a manager level or a manager compensation plan, he might be eligible for certain other benefits as well in the bouquet of benefits or however you call it in your organization. Because he could be getting at a manager or, for example, let's take two examples. One, a person who's working at a managerial level, another person who's working at, say, a vice president level. In your mind, what could be the difference in the compensation structure or compensation plan for these two people? One at a managerial grade, another at a vice president grade. What could be the difference? What could be the difference in the structure of the plan? We'll be having different plans based on the job profile or the job family of the worker. Just see the resemblance, how I'm able to get it over there. The person who's at a job family of vice president and above. I could create a job family which I could say job family is going to be vice president or above, where I will say all those job profiles which are vice president level and above. Another one which is going to be less than vice president. For these job families, I am not going to have any kind of stock option plan or card details. That is what we call it as plans. And again, when I'm going to be actually having plans and grades combined, I call it as a salary package. And this salary package ultimately is going to be linked to an employee at the time of hire or when he's going to move to a new position or via promotion or whatever it is. A person who's going to be, say, promoted, say, from a managerial to a senior manager level, he's going to have a senior manager level package. That is typically how all of this ties down together. Clear on grades, plans, and packages. Clear on grades, plans, and we'll see it in a little bit detail in the next slide that I'm going to be showing you as well. All right. And eligibility rules is like we saw a little while ago. If a person is at a job profile of, say, vice president level, then definitely he's eligible for stock option plans. All right, the next thing that we saw is eligibility rules. For example, we saw that the stock option plan, or more commonly called in Workday terminology across clients as ESOP, which is an employee stock option plan. And different organizations may have different things, but we commonly call them as ESOPs. If the person is going to be a vice president or above, I might create a rule which I'm going to say as job family as vice president and above, then create here, or the employee is going to be eligible for stock options. Otherwise, not eligible. I could possibly create an eligibility rule which I can say that this particular compensation components can default to certain things. And again, I could also have a rule. For example, if the person is going to be working in a metro city because of the commutation, for the commutation purpose, I can give him an additional amount. Or if the person is working in some kind of remote locality, probably in the US, if the person is going to be working on something like a Wyoming or other remote locations, I could possibly say that I can give him an additional allowance for commutation and possibly remote area. Something like that. All these are definitely possible. Let's go to the next possible one. Each employee, like I said, will have multiple components of pay, just like which is there in almost all countries. The US has just one component of pay that is usually called as base pay. And apart from that, they may have something like variable bonus from employee. It could vary, but the common terminology that is there in the US is more or just the base pay only. Nothing else is going to be available. And we'll get the next one. In any organization, we're going to have somebody like a compensation admin who's going to be in charge of creating the entire compensation structure, which is nothing but whatever we've discussed right now in terms of the grade profiles, compensation packages, and also eligibility rules. And again, these eligibility rules will undergo changes from time to time, which means, say, possibly after, say, couple of years, an organization like Amazon or Amazon may say that because of some rationalization policies, when we say that a person who's at a vice president level is not eligible for any car elements, only those who are above a senior vice president level are not going to get car elements, and the vice president will not get car elements. It could even become effective as early as, say, 1 month 2024. In that case, I need to make changes. Most of the charge of this is nothing but the common admin. The next and most important thing that I'm going to be telling you is nothing but compensation element to payroll earning details. Like I said, for every compensation element, say for example, base pay, you're going to have an element called as base pay. This has to definitely flow across the payroll for me to get paid. And that is specifically where this frequency comes in. I'm going to say that the base pay of a person, say working out of the US, is going to be $80 a day year. That means to flow across the payroll and say that this particular person is eligible for a pay of $80,000 a year, which translates to roughly around 6,600 before taxes per month. And this has to be my payroll earning element. See, compensation element, like what I was saying is compensation element is going to vary from organization to organization, and from location to location. Each country, for example, the US is going to have a different compensation structure where they will have only one compensation element, which is called as the base pay. They're not going to have any number of elements like what India or some of the other APAC countries are going to have it. It's just going to be base pay only. Whereas some of the other countries, it is a mandate for you to get some kind of a housing elements, fuel elements. Some organizations, some countries in APAC like Singapore, China or Japan do have such structures, and is the case with India as well. Whereas in the US, it is just going to be a flat base pay only. You do not get any other elements unless there is a common perception that I'm just talking about. Unless certain other organizations are going to have it for certain grades or certain levels only. It's not for everybody. It's only for certain folks. What I was saying is all this compensation element that I have at the end of the day will have touch points with the appropriate payroll element, which is, say, I have a base pay. This base pay has to flow across to my paycheck as base pay per month. I have a base pay of say that 80,000 a year. Then this has to go across in my paycheck as the appropriate pay element, which will also be base pay. But that is at a payroll side of things. What you see in your compensation structure as a linkage to the payroll element or the earning element that you have. Our Carol Lee over here, let me go to her profile. The pay tab. Or let me just go to her job and then compensation income over here. Alright. If you see here, this is a compensation that is available over here. And if I go to the compensation structure of Carol Lee, it says total allowance is going to be like 80 Dalanzit USD or Canadian dollars for this particular case. $80,000, 8,000 Canadian dollars. And the frequency says per year. And if you count down, it is going to show the entire compensation history. What was the compensation on specific dates? All that, assignments and everything are going to be available. And here, if you see, you do have the stock assignments. And the main reason what I wanted to show you all this, what is going to be the linkage between. Let me click something. Just give me a minute. All right, what is going to be? What is going to be the linkage between my salary elements and my payroll? The same element that I see over here has to flow in my payroll as well. In my level, pay slips as the same entity. For each, I do not have this. Probably I do not have this slip completed in this particular tenant over here right now. But in a common example, what happens is for every person who receives a compensation, the same element is going to flow from the compensation side of things to the payroll. It could be like various elements which are there, which is like pre-tax and post-tax. But that linkage has to happen. The next thing, like I said about compensation plans, what is happening for our compensation plan is this is going to contain the plans, the eligibilities, everything which is going to encompass what is called as a compensation package. Let me show you a compensation package which I have just pulled up over here. See, this particular compensation package is just a Sam, let me take another one which is much better. I had a couple of ones which I have put across to it. I Global Idiot GHP because that one has created to me once. This is a more relevant compensation package. First up, what is going to be the eligibility rule, which means for who is it actually eligible? Because the compensation package, I can say that this compensation package is eligible only for folks out of US or folks out of India or APAC or India plus people who are at vice president and above limits, or I could say based on our viewers who are at an admin assistant level. I could have n number of criteria. I could have like job profile, families. This is specifically where I will say, or I will have job families and family groups coming into the picture over here. Like I said, back job families and family groups are more for admin and reporting purposes. This is one live example where I could use, and here this is just a small rule which I have created, which is already available in the system. And this rule, if I scroll down over here, this is going to say organization and superior organizations. For now, just hold on to it right now. I don't want to get into that. Fail level digits. Just remember that this particular anybody who's in the organization or supervisory organization called as Global India LLP CEO is going to be part of this particular compensation package. Anybody in an organization called as Global India LLP will be eligible for this compensation package. And you may ask me a question. Could I have multiple compensation packages for the same organization? Definitely. I can have multiple compensation packages created for the same organization, and I can choose different compensation packages as per my bill and adopt as well. There is no hard and fast rule that a person, or I would say a person can, at any point of a time, can have only one single compensation package. But at an organization level, I could have multiple compensation packages based on rules, criteria, eligibilities, and everything else. Clear on this? Any other questions? And the next thing over here we see here a compensation grade over here, which is more for a director level grade. And at a director level grade, I see multiple grade profiles over here. And each of these grade profiles are going to be having a minimum and a maximum salary with a median salary range as well. And again, that could have multiple rules attached to them as well. Alright. The grade profile is the main purpose of my grade profile is to say what is going to be my salary range for any associate who is working for that particular grade. That is the purpose of my grade profile. And I am going to be tagging my grade profile to a compensation grade. You might have heard this in many organizations which are going to say, this is the budget that we have. And this is possibly the midpoint. They could say something like $80,000 to $100,000 is my range. And the midpoint at your level or whatever level you want to live for is going to be like something around 92K. And this is where all the information comes in. And again, this is going to vary from organization to organization, level to level. Every organization has a different grade, profile, and compensation structure. And this is not provided by Workday because it is not true for all. Any questions here far? Let me ask you to check if you want to check this out. I am going to check this out. It is going to be a collection of grades, plans, and everything else. Clear compensation plan plus my grades is going to be what my compensation package is. And I could have different routes, eligibility routes written for all of them. Any questions here? It's just at a high level. We will be creating certain compensation eligibility rules, packages, and everything as well. But at a high level, I just want you to understand what exactly is going to be there in a compensation package. We saw about compensation packages and everything. Next, the most important thing I just want to discuss today is about frequencies like what we saw over here. Frequency is what to determine what is going to be the amount, either on a yearly, monthly, or an basis. Most importantly, don't get this confused with your pay cycle. Pay cycle is completely different because you have a little or your high credit could say that you're going to be paid X dollars a year, but you could still be paid monthly or bi-monthly as well, or weekly as well. It is completely different. Your compensation frequency is completely different from your paid frequency. Please don't get confused with that, alright? I'm trading it because most people get confused with compensation frequency versus your pay frequency. Don't get confused with your compensation and pay frequency. Sports are completely apples and oranges because I could have a compensation structure which is defined at an annual level, products to be paid and monthly, my staff and they repaid monthly, but my compensation structure is, and well, don't get confused with it. Alright, and where this is being used is only for your compensation and your pay calculations. I could say that my compensation structure is I'm going to be paid X dollars a year and my salary could be paid on a monthly basis. That is what it comes in for this particular compensation plan. I have certain compensation elements, which is number one, the base pay element, and this particular base pay element is something which I could define at an annual basis, and I could have various other elements like something like a variable bonus or something extra. Options which could be defined at a quarterly or a half yearly level as well, right? Every compensation plan and element is going to be completely different. All this is going to come inside my compensation plan, and again, I could have certain rules which are going to come in. Everything is going to be based on my compensation cycle or my frequency. You know, all right, and I could have different compensation frequencies for the same organization based on the location that they work for. Because I could have a global organization like Amazon, which is working in almost 50 or 60 odd countries across the globe. Each country could have different P frequencies are not pay frequencies, compensation frequencies, something like in Japan. If you happen to go to Japan, your compensation structure is always defined at a monthly level. You will be said that you won't be paid something like 600,000 yen. I give that is of your compensation letter. Well, look, in Japan reserved as well as in the US, the compensation structure will say you'll be paid 80,000 in USSD per year. Where you can create all those frequencies is go to maintain frequencies. And these are tenant-wide settings, and I wouldn't play around with this much unless there is a necessity for me to do it. If you see, all these are dummy ones which are created, but the standard ones, which are usually there is number one bi-weekly, and this is a common terminology, and many different organizations don't think that bi-week means twice a week. Bi-weekly means in all practical HR purposes because I've seen the same thing in other HMN tools as well, like PeopleSoft and or the same suit bi-week cleanings once in 2 weeks, and it is not a standard English definition which is like twice a week. It means once in 2 weeks or fortnightly. Certain organizations have it as fortnightly, only the US. We call it as bi-weekly, but it actually means fortnightly or once in 2 weeks, and daily, not much used over here. And I could have hourly, I could have monthly, quarterly, I could have certain pay elements like variable pay and say that the frequency for that is going to be quarterly. All right, that is number one and the most important thing. I just want you to look at over here is called as the annualization factor over here. Why this assumes importance is we saw about the compensation that was not employee, and if we go to Karen Lee's profile, see if you see over here annualization factor. This is something which I would definitely want you to pay a lot of attention to because this drives practically many things. Especially, it is based on the us that certain organizations are going to mandate the employees. For example, let me go to you see, if a person is for this or person is expected to clock, say 8 hours a day, which is standard in us in the US. You are all about practical purpose. You are expected to work 8 hours a day and 40 hours a week, just standard. But as in Europe, certain other countries, it could be like in Europe and Nordics, it could be like 7.5 hours a day, which could translate to 37.5 hours per week. This particular annualization factor comes in when the payroll is going to compute your annual salary. That is why it is very important over here. What is this? 2080 mean is the number of us and employees expected to work, and if one day is equivalent to 8 hours, if I just compute it like that and compute it against the number of working days in a year, or I would multiply this by number of weekly hours into 52, a plus an additional factor that I would like to have that is available this, and each organization may have something different over here. For example, if I'm going to say bi-weekly, it means once in 2 weeks, which is common across the US. If I say that your pay is going to be or your compensation is going to be in your letter, you're going to be paid like $2,000 every bi-weekly, which means every fortnightly you're going to pay $2,000, and your annual salary is going to be 2,000 into 26, which is like a number of fortnights in a year, which comes to 26. Your annual pays won't be approximately $52,000 or here, and that is where this annualization factor comes in. And these are 10 and white settings and the basic setup. Please don't meddle with us because this actually drives a lot of payroll and compensation calculations. And tomorrow, if you want to put some calculations over here, this is where I would want you to come in and check as well. All right, you have a weekly one, you have semi-monthly, quarterly, and well, everything is available over here. This is where all that frequency and the factors come in. Please do like, share, and subscribe to our channel. For more information, contact us sales@therightuptalk.com.